Hello, and welcome to Bookish Haze, a podcast where we get to talk about two of our favorite things, Taylor Swift and reading. I'm Katie.
And I'm Sameen, and every episode we're going to take a book or series and analyze the characters as they relate to songs across Taylor Swift's entire discography.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Bookish Haze. We are taking a detour to what we originally scheduled to talk about the brand new book from Ali Hazelwood that just came out. I keep wanting to call it Wet because that was the original title, but it is called Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, and we devoured this book. So we're just going to dive right in, pun intended, and start talking about it. And lots of spoilers incoming. So, Sameen, what did you think?
I mean, I do think, I fully understand why she didn't call the book Wet. I feel like that would have just been, a lot. But it also, makes sense why she was really considering it.
Mm-hmm.
It
Wait,
was
also, sorry to interrupt, Wet
yeah,
plus the cover art would have been, so
too
much.
much. Yeah. No, 100%. It was a really good call to not do that. I do think there really isn't a but there. It was just really well done. I think it was written really well. I think it was a really good departure from the things that she's done before. And she typically does that kind of copy and paste template. I feel like we saw with that
Mm-hmm.
science trilogy. And I like that she stepped away from it. I will say I did love that Not in Love kind of took us out of academia a little bit more and brought us more into the real world and to characters who honestly were just a little bit older, which I appreciated. I think going back into this book and realizing that these people were literally 21, 22 was just a lot. And then on top of that, with the fact that they were all just so talented and Olympians. And honestly, we read this book and then it was immediately after was the Super Bowl. And I was just kind of sitting there and I was like, how do people so accomplish so much in such little time in their lives? So aside from a weird inferiority complex I wasn't expecting to pop up from this one, I really did enjoy it.
That is so fair. I really, yes, I think whenever someone's age does not match my picture of them, I just choose to ignore it, even though it
Mhm.
was definitely hard in this book. But yeah, the fact that they were 20, early 20s did not match up with how they were acting, I feel like. I mean, to be fair, we did get a lot about how Lucas was very mature and very
Yeah.
did not care, even though he was a superstar. Um, but yeah, overall, I would agree with that. I really enjoyed it. Even though we were back in academia, I feel like even though you were in college and they did do their biology project, I feel like there was a lot more focus on the sports side of things. So I thought
Mhm.
that was really interesting, and definitely felt different from her Love Hypothesis books. I did like the Olive and Adam shout out, which I texted to me and
Hell
it
yeah.
took me a second to catch it because I was like, why does this sound so familiar? Like Dr. Carlson. And I was like, that's
Who
right.
is Dr. Carlson? Why do I know Dr.
Yeah.
Carlson?
And okay, it was well written because what actually first warning bells me was because of the way he was acting. I was like, this
Yeah.
douche sounds familiar. And then I was like, yep, that makes sense. Character consistency.
Yeah, when we met him in this book, I remember just kind of sitting there and I was like, what is this? Why does this ring a bell? And then the line that popped into my head was, and Dr. Carlson was a known ass, or I think it something like that from Love Hypothesis. And I was like, why does this guy sound like such an asshole? And then I was like, got it. We do have really good character consistency. I also really liked that when she brought it over and did this little character cameo, it wasn't this ooey gooey version of him that we came to know in Love Hypothesis. It stayed very true to form.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was very fun because usually I feel like when we get cameos, it's one little scene and then, you never see them again. You're just like, oh,
Yeah.
indeed. I'm specifically thinking of People We Meet on Vacation, the airport scene, which was on the back of Beach Read.
Yeah.
And so I like that they came up consistently and that at the very end when they were like, oh my gosh, is that Olive with Dr. Carlson? And that was just funny because that is a very on brand experience for what if I was a college student who discovered this would have.
Yeah, it was very much like when your teacher is not in the classroom kind of energy, which I
Yeah.
loved. And then I also really liked the just the small detail of the pumpkin spice like notepad, and
Mhm.
when she was like, I guess it's just the way that the biology department functions is like these pumpkin spice notepads, and you're like, ha ha ha, no, I know why it is.
Yes, agreed. Okay, so now that we have all the gushing out, was there
Mhm.
anything that you didn't like about the book?
Um
I guess you did kind of mention the academia, like you appreciated Not in Love not being in that setting.
Yeah, I think it was just like a lot of going back to academia, and a lot of it was uh, I guess related to that feeling. But then there was also the piece where I'm like, I wish that they had so much of this emphasis on communication, and then towards the end when we saw just a complete like lack of communication that was like drawn from insecurity. Maybe that just goes back to again like the age piece, right? Like I think that was maybe the one moment when they really were acting their age. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense at like 21, 22, but like perhaps hopefully something that you would grow out of like when your brain fully develops and you hit 25, right? And I think that was kind of most of it. I really, really loved how she stayed true to her character. When we kind of came across that bully that was just like, I can't believe
Yeah.
that Penn is like this,
Mhm,
like she's the
mhm.
worst. And Scarlett was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm going to stay true to who I am and like what I believe. Um, and I really liked seeing that, not just like character, but like, yeah, the character of the character, and the integrity I think that she held as a person. And I think that really helped to enhance, like, you really wanted to root for her and continue to root for her because she stood up to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that having her and Penn become friends, at first, I was very like, how is this all gonna work? Like, this is so
Mhm.
bizarre. But then they did develop a friendship, and I liked that it was friendship independent of
Yes.
Lucas and Penn's relationship and her relationship with each of them. Um, because it could have very easily been like too messy, or like the friendship felt forced or felt weird or something. Because obviously like Penelope and Lucas were still close friends and exes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you could tell in that scene that no, this is a true friendship. She actually does care about Penn, and like they have formed bonds outside of the circumstances that created, the initial contact.
Yeah, and I think it took a second to get there, honestly, because I'm just thinking about it, and I like initially wanted to be like, there weren't a lot of conversations that like passed the Bechdel test, I think, between them. But I feel like there were a lot of like really good moments where you saw the friendship develop. Um, and like it seemed like they did a good job of kind of building how that friendship grew and like keeping us aware of what Scarlett felt about Penn, like platonically, obviously, but like just how she regarded her as a person. And so I feel like that really helped, so that when we got to the end and she was like, I think of Penn as my best friend, it was like, okay, I feel like this makes sense because we saw how that relationship created and grew and changed, and like we saw how you felt every step of the way. So even though like maybe that's not how I would form friendships with people, it wasn't necessarily on the reader to be like, this is how my friendships function. It was like, ah, I understand how you are feeling. And I feel like it was a good, honest instance of like telling a little bit more than showing, um, which I think is rare to find.
Yeah, I will say I do think that Penelope low key. First of all, I did believe that she was gonna be like some backstabbing traitor at the end,
100%.
which was like, well done, Ali Hazelwood. But also, like when I think about the whole situation, I am kind of like, you aren't actually that great of a friend,
No.
because, like, or just like a great of a person. Because I'm like, why are you like blurting out someone's such sexual proclivities? Like, even though you're drunk, like I get it, sure, whatever. But I'm just like, the circumstances of how they Lucas and Scarlett were like interacted or like kind of
Yeah.
planted the seed. I was like, this is not a good moment. Like a friend should not do that.
Yeah, there was a lot of moments where I was just kind of like, Pen, why are you doing this? And then she had a lot of moments where she was like, it was like some of it was like, Pen, why are you doing this? But then at the end too, when she just kind of burst out and she was like, well, it's not that serious anyway. And it was like, this was really terrible of you. It was not kind of you at all. And I guess like it would have been nice if she didn't do that, but we did need a conflict, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um and it was kind of, I feel like that was the ball that we were all waiting for it to drop, because
Yeah.
it was just like her like announcement at the beginning, and she was like, "You guys should sleep together," and then she was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna keep discounting this relationship until it's back what I need." And it kind of came full circle to the point where she was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not going to admit to anyone that like we broke up," and it kind of was that like, "Okay, you need to grow up" kind of moment.
Mhm. That's one
Um,
thing that irked
Mhm.
me throughout the book because swim team did not know that they broke up, and on one hand, I get it. I'm like, "Sure." But then when Lucas and Scarlett were, like, getting together and actively developing feelings, but Lucas was still kinda letting Scarlett hang over him, even
Yeah,
though I know he probably just was like, "This is my best friend. I know I don't care about well, I care about her, but, like, I'm not, I don't wanna be in a relationship with her." I'm like, "Still, why are you not telling everyone yourself once it got more serious? And why are you letting her act like she's your partner?"
and they weren't subtle about this
Mm-mm.
really at all, and it was just like, yeah, when they got caught by the swim team, I feel like, 1, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, and 2, it's like, I feel like it just maybe put a lot of the relationships that Scarlett could have had with the rest of her team aside. Um, but yeah, I think that it just kind of like brushed aside and like made smaller a lot of the relationships that she could have had to like just be better friends with people.
Mhm. Yeah. Also, speaking of not getting caught earlier, literally there were cameras everywhere they were getting it on. I'm like,
It's so
"What is
real.
happening?" Like, I'm choosing to ignore that, but I was just like, I guess the locker room, you can't have cameras, but the
Correct.
science lab, definitely cameras. It's fine. Um,
Yeah.
Another piece I would just like totally switching topics that I wanted to mention was that I really liked the therapist point like of
Mhm.
view because I feel like you kind of got to understand swimming better because she was like, explaining it to her therapist and her therapist was
Yeah.
like asking, you know, questions about it. Um but also you could see kind of like the mental journey that she went on throughout the book.
Yeah. I also liked how we immediately found out how good of a therapist that therapist was. Just I was like in the very beginning of the book when she was like, "There are 6 different types of dives," and she goes, "Okay, and why did you only name 5?"
Mhm.
And it's like, damn, you like hit the nail on the head. On that note too, I think that like you said for the mental journey, I really appreciated that her like first time being able to hit that one dive that she wasn't able to do for ages was like when she was on her own and kind of doing it because she enjoyed the sport and not in front of anyone. I feel like if we had kind of one of those like almost like decom moments where you're just like, all right, and here you are in front of a crowd. It would have like cheapened it a lot. And so I
Mhm.
really liked that it was like something that she did for herself.
Yeah, I agree. That was what I was going to bring up next too is that I liked or I guess I was just going to ask what you thought about the moment where she actually does her dive.
Yeah.
Um but think it was great because it was like, okay, so she does the dive by herself and is excited, but then she fails like the next couple times.
Mhm.
And like I like that there was the passage around how she didn't do the dive. I forget if she just switched it or if she just failed it. But then she like was angry underwater. And so it showed that like shift between, okay, now I know I can do it. I'm not like scared of this anymore and I'm gonna like work towards it, but
Yeah.
it's not immediately gonna be perfect.
Yeah, I think it was really well balanced there. And I'm honestly kind of surprised, like, as we're talking about this, how much I really did like the book and how many good pieces there were of it. Cause I feel like this was just like when we first read Love Hypothesis, I remember messaging you and being like, okay, here's the thing. Like, this book made you feel really good about a lot of things. And you, like, really were rooting for the characters. And, like, you can tell why it has such a massive following. But quite frankly, the writing was terrible.
Yep.
It
So
was
true.
like, it was so bad. And I think that this book, she came into like a really good writing style. And like I feel like there's still a lot of awkward moments and things like that, but I think she did a better job of like building it into the character and making it less so like a pick me character,
Hmm.
which I think is what we've been lacking in a lot of other books recently.
Yes. Also, her pacing was pretty good. There was like a point in the middle where I was like, can we get them together or like speed this up a little bit? But for the most
Mhm.
part, I was like, everything happened in a way that felt natural and not like I'm just waiting for something to happen and then everything happens.
Yeah, it was really, really good pacing. Like I know we were saying that it was a slow burn, and I think it was a
Mm-hmm.
relatively slow burn. Um, but it was very well done and
Yes.
established correctly.
Yes.
So, hoots. We love to see it.
Also, if we
Mhm.
don't talk about this right now, I will forget. Her roommate, so funny. Like, I could never figure out exactly how much was supposed to be like in jest because everything read like in jest, right? But like the way that Scarlett actually talked or thought about her made it seem like they actually hated each other. But
Yeah.
it was like so funny. I really liked her roommate as a character.
Yeah, I really liked how her roommate was just always there, gave that tough love energy, and then also just, like I was trying to figure out I feel like that was maybe the moment in the book where it was like, "Okay, this feels like Ali Hazelwood's, like, initial writing," where it was, like, a little bit cringe and, like, not fully, like, built out. So I do think that that relationship, it would have been nice to see that fleshed out a little bit more. And I do kind of cringe every time someone is like, "This is so and so, and she's terrifying." And it's like, "All right, I get like you're trying to say that she's a badass, but like, could we find a different way of describing this, please?"
Fair. That also reminds me of like the fact that Scarlett was apparently so hot and just like had people who wanted to date her and she just like never realized. I was like, this feels a little bit of like, yes, an Ali Hazelwood signature.
Yeah. There's a little bit of that like pick me energy, but she did a good job of avoiding it otherwise. So we will give her those hoots.
Agreed. Yeah, like I think
Um,
it was like Scarlett was written where she literally did seem oblivious. Like the line I'm thinking
yeah.
of when Lucas was like, I could tell when you didn't notice me and I could tell when you became aware of me. I was like, oh, that was so good. Because yeah, I love a pining man. So it makes
Mhm.
me laugh that like he was literally like, yeah, we had so many classes together and you just like didn't realize.
And we got really good monologues in this one. I really liked it. I also liked that like the monologues were really good, and then on the topic of like Lucas and like noticing her and pining and all of that, it was also just really good because he always started out with like how brilliant she was and how
Mhm.
capable she was. Um and how like athletic and all of these other things, and it wasn't necessarily like it was really good at just like showcasing care for a three-dimensional character in a three-dimensional way.
Mhm.
And I feel like we just don't see that often enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was sorry. I was distracted because I was thinking about like people talking about this book and how
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of reviews are like, this is like her kinkiest book yet, which like fair, I
Sure.
guess. I feel like it was maybe like the most sexually open book. Which I think is great. I think it was mostly well done. I did text Simeon a few times and I was like, some of this I don't know if it was supposed to be like dirty talk, but like getting into the sex scenes was like so bad that it kind of like
Yeah.
distracted me, like took me out of the scene, but it did make me laugh and I'm like whatever. It's not like that needs to be, the best written part. But I feel like what was more like what I appreciated about it was the way that Ali Hazelwood explored um why they were like interested in this and how like emphasize how much of it was about trust and like showing the trust in their relationship um and also Lucas calling Scarlett out for being like you don't like men in general because I think like reading it back I was like yeah okay she did have certain signs but like I hadn't picked up on that really and so it was like I did need you to call that out and like I liked how he did it.
Yeah, it was very like very good open communication consistently throughout the entire thing. Um in a way that like in a way that didn't feel like it was over communicative and it wasn't performative. It was just very much like, yeah, I can understand people having this conversation on a day-to-day basis as well.
Mhm. Oh, I just am gonna keep talking about the scenes I keep
Please
popping
do.
into my head, but I was just like also thinking about when first of all, actually backing up. Okay, so do we think Penn calls him Luck or Luke?
Luke. Because I
Okay.
think we've seen it. I think I've seen
LUC, right? From like Once Upon a Broken Heart
yes,
is
that's
Luck.
exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Because I think it is like Luke makes sense, but I'm like, can you just add the E to it? Like um but anyways, Luke's brother, Jan, came and then loved the discovery of him being like, yeah, whenever he got overwhelmed, he would like deny himself for a certain amount of time, which is just like so funny to me because then like I love that Scarlett called him out. It was like, I am actually a human being. Like, did you ever consider
You can't
how
do
I might
this.
react?
Yeah.
Because like yes, I feel like a lot of times the main female character like would not do that. And so I like that we actually got that and that she was willing to stand up for herself, which to your going back to like what you said about her character, um, like standing up to Penn's bully.
Can't even
Like,
remember
yeah,
her name.
me neither. Not important. Oh,
Yeah.
Carissa, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, I just felt like on brand for her. And so I liked that we kept having these moments to showcase like what type of person Scarlett was.
Yeah. I think that that was really, really well written. I feel like we went through a lot of the likes and dislikes. I was going to ask you, what do you dislike about the book? But I think we went through a lot of it already.
Yeah, I liked the book. 5 stars. Would
Really?
reread, would read. But it's because I say this all the time. I'm such like a vibe rater. So like
That's so
end the
fair.
book was on a high, 5 stars. It's
Damn,
very
is that your
easy.
first 5-star read of 2025?
I think so. Let's see. How many books have I read this year? Um, let's find out. Okay, so I read 8 books
Mhm.
and oh, actually no, it is my second
Ooh.
because I read the I Deal with the Bossy Devil, KU, Bad Billionaires Bosses
Oh,
book and also rated that 5 stars.
that one is such a good book.
It
Really
is
good
it's
vibes.
really good. Would
Um,
recommend.
fantastic banter.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think I gave this one about a 4 stars. Just because I do think that there's like some pieces that I like wish happened a little bit better, and also like it's good vibes, but I don't necessarily want to go back to it because I feel like it's too much college for me. Um,
That's fair.
but yeah, what
Yeah.
would you, what Taylor Swift song would you put with it?
Clean?
Ooh, say more.
I think because okay, obviously there's the whole water imagery, so I'm always on the nose, but I think because like the message behind clean, right, is like you kind of are in a down period and you I don't know if you like break free, but you finally like reawaken and feel like your old self again kind of. I'm
Mhm.
doing a really bad job of explaining
I
clean,
think it
but
makes sense.
yeah, and I feel like that's kind of what the message of the book was. Like obviously we love the romance side of things, but there was also her personal journey around figuring out why she couldn't do this inward dive and how to get to the point where she is able to do it. Um, and so I think like between her relationships, or I guess like backing up, between where she was at the beginning of the book and where she was at the end of the book, she like kind of did become a new person and was able to like feel like a new like her old self but also a new improved version of herself in the sense that like now she actually feels like she has connections to the teams and she is or was overwhelmed by everything but she's like taking advantage of therapy. She's not just like waving it off to just get sign off for her dives. um and yeah, she's like being truthful with her partner and like not running away from the confrontation even though it did take them whatever 9 months. And Luke was like, okay, I'm not gonna say it because I know you're not ready, but like we all know what's going on here.
Mhm.
And I feel like by the end, she was more willing to acknowledge her faults and move forward.
I like that it does capture a lot of her growth and a lot of her like shifts that we got to see.
Yeah. Do you have any that come to mind?
I had Gold Rush actually. And I feel like that one just kind of started playing in my head a little bit in that portion that you mentioned when they are having that conversation and he was like, I really just like couldn't let you know because you weren't ready for it. And I just think about that concept of like, I don't like a gold rush. I don't like feeling my face like flush. Can't remember the exact
Yeah.
lyrics, obviously. Um, but I liked that it was this concept of like you could tell that there was like an immediate connection and all of this, but she was not necessarily being open to it because of all of the things that she had gone through. And so you had to like similarly, right? Like I think this book had a lot of her growth. And I liked that even though it was like a rom-com, like it still acknowledged them as people and as individuals.
Mhm.
So maybe Gold Rush doesn't totally encompass all of that, but encompassed all of the gooey bits. That brought a lot of joy, and it was just like, yeah, I don't necessarily like a gold rush, but eventually you just kind of come to admit that that's what it is, and that it was just a lot of really positive things kind of happening all at once. And obviously, there's always going to be like negative things. There's going to be your ups and downs, right? You have to have down to go up. But all in all, I feel like this was just like a lot of very good things that happened. And a lot of it, I think, was good because of her perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and I think one piece of it, which is leaving and going off a tangent from the song itself, but I really did like how the book kind of addressed a little bit of imposter syndrome as well.
Mhm.
And I think that helped a little bit with that inferiority complex I was mentioning at the beginning, where it was just like, yeah, like sometimes people do have imposter syndrome. Um, and it's really real to see that, especially when you're like coming out of injury and like dealing with really incredible things and then having to come back from it. Um, and like it's okay to feel like you are not on top, but also to acknowledge that like you might be. Um, and that even though it doesn't feel fantastic, you have made it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a good call out. I feel like, I mean, granted, the book still was like, yes, these people are the best. They're the top of their game. Like Luke is
Yes.
winning his gold medals. But like even when they went to one of their competitions and like they were doing the synchronous diving, like it was not like, okay, they're immediately like the best ever. They're
Hmm.
gonna win gold. It's like, no, actually they like barely qualified and like most of the time got like fifth place. So
Yeah.
I think it was like a good way of being like, yes, these are, like top athletes and they are very good at what they do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to win everything. And it's like one of those types of books. Like they still have to compete against other people who are also at the top of their game.
Yeah, it was very much it was that moment, and then the other one that I was thinking of in particular was when she went to her stepmom and she was like, "Here's all of the different things that needs to happen in order for me to qualify for the world championships." And then like literally like 2 chapters later, you come back in and she's like, "Oh my god, all of those things happened and I qualified for the world championship. What am I doing here?" Um and yeah, so similar to like what you were saying, I really appreciated how in this case, like she qualified, but you could tell like it wasn't like she wasn't going to be a shoo-in for it. Like there were a lot of different things that had to go wrong for that, but that didn't minimize her achievement anymore. And then when she got there, it was a matter of proving that she could do it, but also like proving that to herself because it had already been proven that she was capable of it.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that was just a nice reminder in life.
Yes, very true. Um, what did you think of Lucas as a character? Or like I guess as a love interest too, but
I thought it was interesting. I think that there was a lot of like very blunt moments that they played off with culture.
mm.
Also, I think that it is so like she loves people in the Netherlands. And like in this like I know it's not the Netherlands, but like this like region, I don't even know what it is. It's like this very specific region of Europe. And
Like
the
the
only way that I
Scandinavian
can
countries?
yeah, you're right, Scandinavian. I these country she really loves these cozy countries with very minimal diversity.
Yeah.
That's how I will put it.
Yeah, fair.
Um, yeah, and so it was really kind of funny to see that come to fruition, but I liked that we got to see a little bit of his family. I liked that we didn't necessarily get just a monologue, but we got like little bits and pieces of the monologue when his like brother came into town and just like how his family acted. And like I like how they built out his backstory and we got to see more of I feel like a lot of times when you read a rom-com, you miss like the community that exists around people. Like you miss a lot of the like
Mhm.
the fact that they actually have friends outside of each other. And so it makes it feel a little bit less codependent. And so I like how they built that. And I like how they showed like who he was as a person and as a leader. And so we got to like kind of build that trust with Scarlett through that
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. Like I think a lot, like you said, these series or not that this is a series, but like these rom-coms have a lot of like here are the main characters of this book and here are their best friends who are going to be the main characters of the next book. But like
Hmm.
you don't really get a lot of these independent relationships that are there to like show that they are a fully fleshed human outside of their partner. And this
Yeah.
book, yeah, definitely did that really well. Like I feel like there's a lot of instances of independent moments between the two, with like their friends, like you said, of Luke being a leader or like him with his roommates and like Scarlett with like Carissa or Scarlett and her stepmom. So um even though like thinking about it and like saying it out loud, I'm like, oh, there were kind of like a lot of side characters, I didn't feel like any of them were just like there for this one plot point or and like not important. Like I felt like they all helped build this world really well.
Yeah, it was well done. What did you think of Luke?
Yeah, I liked him. I think like I would agree that there was a lot of stuff that he did that kind of got written off to being like, oh, he's just from Sweden.
Mhm.
Um, and so for one thing, I'm thinking about like he's just like an awful communicator in text form. Although it did sound like once they actually got together, he was a little bit better. But I was like, some of this could have been resolved if you simply just like texted a little more often. Like I know there's a few moments where Scarlett was like, "Oh, I didn't know like Luke was back. Like Penn knew, but I didn't." And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, are you texting Penn all the time and like not Scarlett? So like that sometimes that confused me. Um, but I think generally like his actions obviously showed were very healthy
Mhm.
for the most part. And also, there's something I wanted to say. Hmm. Um, I don't remember, but oh, I was just gonna say that like e- even though we were like, oh, the girls were not that not always gonna win everything, they had to struggle through. I like that Luke was literally just like, no, he's just gonna win everything.
Yeah.
Like I was just like,
Good point,
okay,
though.
you know what? That's fair. Like not, his swimming part had like was not important, so I was like,
Somebody had
sure.
to win.
Yeah, but I did like that we did get the moments of like humanity where she like talked to him about, oh, like what's your favorite stroke, and like he was basically like, I can't do the butterfly or whatever, like I'm so bad, or like I tried and I did terrible. And so it's like, okay, so at least it's kind of showing that he just honed his like strength, and it's not like, oh, he's actually just amazing at everything he does. And like you said, he called her the genius and stuff, and like in the biology, like she was so much better at the algorithms and the computational biology part. And he like acknowledged that, which I appreciated.
Mhm.
And yeah, like I said, just showed that he is not 100% perfect. He's not supposed to be this like super genius, amazing, super athletic, like super rich guy, which he is.
Yeah.
But
It was very humanizing
yeah,
ish.
yeah,
Yeah.
like still crazy, but enough to make you like him.
I would agree with that piece also about like communication. I'm thinking about just like I know earlier I was like, oh, their communication was fantastic. And like honestly, it was when they communicated and it almost felt like it was on opposite sides of the scale. Like if they communicated really well. If they ceased to communicate, they just fully stopped talking. And it was like, can we pick, please, what we
True,
want to do here?
true. One, this is so unrelated to anything we talked about, but it like stuck in my head. Again, back to being a pining man. I love that like we found out just like casually while they were, I think, in Amsterdam or something, that like Luke and Penn used to do threesomes. I
Yes.
was like, first of all, that was like just a super like chill way to introduce that. So, which I
Mhm.
appreciate. Again, going back to like it being more of a sexually open book, and like I feel like I like that they kind of almost minimize these like stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, it's what
Made it more realistic.
agreed. And where was I going with that? Oh, but yeah, my pining man comment where he was like, when you joined, like you're the first and like only person I asked Penn to like ask if you were interested. And I was like, wow, he's been down bad for several years. Which then
Mhm.
goes back to being like, why were you still with Penn if you like get after Scarlet, maybe?
Yeah, he did a really good job of it was a lot of really good like moments where you were like, "Oh damn, you have been pining. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate this." Yeah, and I think going back to that comment and just like the piece of like why did you stay with Penn? I feel like they did do a good explanation towards the end of just like staying with each other for the sake of like comfort and it's because it was like something that you fell into for so long. And I feel like that's a really valid point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good moment when they acknowledged their growth as well away from that and being like, I don't necessarily need this anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that it was good that well, it was just, I guess, back to being realistic. When Penn would say comments about Luke, and Scarlett would be like, "Well, I guess she's known him longer. Like that's not my
Yeah.
experience." And then as the book progressed, it became like apparent to Scarlett and to us. It was like, "Oh, you just have this mental image of him
Just
as a
like
16-year-old,
notion.
and you're stuck." And that is like how you envision everything he does. Um, so I feel like that was, again, the journeys all around, I think, were really well portrayed.
Yeah. I think it makes a very big difference when you're understanding how well the person understands the other person, and you're like, ah,
Yes.
there's a version of you that exists for everyone. There's a version of
Yes.
you that exists for your best friends, and there are very different versions of every version of you. I don't know.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is that, not to be the one who's like bringing up sex all the time, but I feel like Ali Hazelwood, like my one, I think, big, like not enough for it to matter because it was not the point of the book, but like I think she struggled with trying to deal with like the whole dom sub thing
Mhm.
without, and like explain it in the way that it's like it's more about trust and just like she has so much going on, she just wants to be told what to do to calm like what's going on in her head, which makes total sense. Sure, great. But I feel like sometimes she tried to over explain it in a way that it then went back around to like, okay, daddy issues, which I don't know if you felt that way, but some of the dialogue I was like, or not the dialogue, some of like her and Scarlett's internal monologue or like trying to explain it, I was just like, this makes me cringe a little bit because I feel like it's taking away from the message of like why she's actually doing it more than, but like other parts I think explained it really well.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of moments where she like leaned on to this point of like having daddy issues and then also like not totally explaining it. And I feel like some of that was built in for the sake of like kind of creating and maintaining some of that mystery around it. Like,
Mm.
ooh, what happened? And so it was kind of, I feel like a lot of times when authors do like this parental trauma trope, it's like you just kind of bring it up and then you bring it up so many times that the reader's like, what happened? And I think that that's kind of like what this was.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I've ever seen it like done in a particularly eloquent way, honestly. Like I think that yeah, this just kind of continued that trend of like why are we bringing this up now? Like why are we doing it this way? Isn't there a better way to say it?
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, ultimately I like that Ali Hazelwood, even if she's back in a familiar setting, I feel like I can see, or like I guess I can read her growth in her writing
Yeah.
between all the different books, and also that she's exploring different things. Like I think I texted you this as well, but basically like obviously she did Bride and she did Check and Mate, and like
Yeah.
she's trying different genres that I feel like, I guess they're all in the same genre. She's trying different styles.
Yeah, she went for a little bit of fantasy, she went for a little bit of academia, she went for a little bit of this and like
Yeah.
it's yeah. I think she's doing a good job of diversifying it. I feel like we see a lot of rom-com authors who do just like the same thing over and over and over. And like it's cute. Like the copy and paste is fun, don't get me wrong, especially when you're like, all right, this was 300 pages. I read it, I devoured it in one night and I don't necessarily want to reread it, but I kind of want to stay back in the universe. And so like
Yep.
there's a lot of authors that do that really well and I think that she is finding a niche, doing something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like you said, just branching out and trying different things and I admire the experimentation because it doesn't always hit. But
Yes. Yeah. Well, what I think I really like about it is that it feels like she did it in a way that was meant to strengthen her writing and like become a
mhm.
stronger writer. And I feel like it showed in this book that I mean, maybe it hasn't helped. Maybe she's just doing other stuff and like has just written a lot of books. But I'm like,
Yeah.
clearly something is going on. And that is one thing that I appreciate. And I imagine having to think a little bit in a different creative space would help
Yeah.
write another book.
Definitely at minimum an A for effort, but as
Yes.
we've talked about, an A for execution as well.
True. But yeah, I think this is one of my favorite books of hers. Check and Mate, I need to do a reread. I've said this a million times so that I can compare because that is another one of my favorites. But feel like she has pumped out so many new books because she also had that like
She
novella,
has.
the gamer novella, and I'm just like, how do you have time? Where do you have all these ideas? Like, give me your secrets.
I like it. Yeah. I'm like, did you do a brainstorming workshop, but now you're just able to flesh out every single idea? That is such a skill. I feel like I throw out 90% of my ideas whenever I brainstorm anything. So
No, so true.
hoots to her.
Hmm.
Well, I think that's all we've got for today. On that note, join us next time because we will be going back with our blind date with the book. So every other episode, we'll be doing kind of a coast to coast blind date exchange. And then following our blind date with the book, we will also be getting into Onyx Storm. We're so excited to talk
Finally.
through that one, but honestly, like, we'll see how much of a filler book it turns out to be.
Yes, yeah. We did very obviously skip over Onyx Storm for this month because we just didn't read Onyx Storm in time and we really wanted to read Deep End. So we will be doing it next month and we're very excited. I feel like I've heard a lot of mixed things, so I'm ready, excited to discuss and form our own opinions.
Hell yeah. Talk to y'all next time.
Bye.